I'm a 27-year-old guy with a decent paying job. I wouldn't say I'm rich, but I'm comfortable. At least I would be if my family didn't treat me like their personal ATM. Growing up, it was always drilled into me to take care of family. That's fine, I guess, but somewhere along the way, helping out turned into me funding practically everything. My mom and two siblings, both in their mid-20s and unemployed, have come to expect me to pick up the tab for just about everything. It's frustrating, but every time I push back, I'm hit with guilt trips about all the sacrifices mom made for us growing up. Christmas is the worst. My family has this big tradition where we go all out, decorations, a huge dinner, and of course tons of gifts. It's nice in theory, but somehow I always end up paying for most of it. My mom, in particular, has expensive taste. She's obsessed with luxury items, especially designer purses. The problem? She can't afford them, but that doesn't stop her from wanting them. This year, everything started unraveling in late November. We were sitting around after dinner, and mom casually mentioned a specific designer purse she had her eye on. She described it in detail, brand, color, size, before dropping the bombshell price, over $2,000. My siblings immediately chimed in, hyping it up and saying how much she deserved it. At first, I laughed. Surely this was a joke. I mean, $2,000 for a purse? When I'm already juggling holiday expenses. But mom wasn't laughing. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the awkwardness lingered. Here's the thing, I'd already spent a good chunk of money on Christmas. I had thoughtful gifts planned for everyone, including my mom. Her gift wasn't designer level expensive, but it was meaningful and something I knew she'd like. Still, I brushed off her comment, thinking she was just caught up in the moment. Work has been extra hectic lately, with me pulling longer hours to cover holiday costs. Between that and the usual year-end stress, I've barely had time to breathe. Then, about a week after the purse incident, a message popped up in the family group chat. Mom wrote, "It's disappointing when your own kids don't appreciate you. I guess I shouldn't expect much." It didn't take a genius to figure out what she was hinting at. My siblings jumped in right away, egging me on. They kept saying things like, "Just get her the purse. It's not a big deal. You can afford it." It was like they were on some team I hadn't signed up for. Meanwhile, my dad stayed completely neutral, as usual. His only contribution was, "I'm staying out of this." Classic dad move. At that point, I decided to clear the air. I called mom directly and explained I couldn't afford the purse. I reminded her about the gift I'd already bought and how much effort I'd put into planning Christmas. Her response? She acted like I'd just told her I was skipping Christmas altogether. She went on about how much she sacrificed for me over the years and how ungrateful I was being. Then came the ultimatum. If I don't get that purse, there's no point in celebrating Christmas this year. I was stunned. She wasn't just upset, she was genuinely saying she'd cancel Christmas if I didn't cave. I hung up, feeling like the walls were closing in. The next few days were tense. The group chat was eerily quiet, except for a few passive-aggressive comments from my siblings. They'd text things like, "Some people really need to learn the meaning of family," clearly directed at me. Meanwhile, mom wasn't answering my calls or texts. I felt torn. On one hand, I didn't want to ruin Christmas for everyone. On the other hand, this whole situation was absurd. I mean, who cancels Christmas over a purse? Still, I found myself second-guessing everything. Was I being selfish? Was it really such a big deal to buy her the purse if it meant keeping the peace? As all of this was swirling in my head, I decided to do something I've never done before, turn to Reddit. I needed an outside perspective. Was this normal? Were other families like this? Or was my mom being unreasonable? I laid it all out, the family dynamics, the Christmas tradition, the purse, everything, and hit post. The responses came pouring in. At first, I was overwhelmed. Strangers from all over were telling me what they thought, sharing their own stories, and giving advice. It was like stepping into an entirely different world, one where people weren't afraid to call out toxic behavior, even from family. Some of the comments hit hard, but they gave me a lot to think about. By the time I logged off, I wasn't any closer to a decision. Christmas was fast approaching, and the pressure was mounting. Part of me wanted to stick to my guns, but another part just wanted the drama to end. Either way, one thing was clear. This Christmas wasn't going to be like any other. Update 1. The fallout started a few days after my Reddit post. Mom sent a long message in the family group chat announcing that Christmas was officially canceled. According to her, there was no point in celebrating because no one cared about her happiness. It was dramatic, even for her. The group chat exploded. My siblings wasted no time piling on, calling me selfish and accusing me of ruining the family tradition. They painted me as the bad guy, completely ignoring how much I've already done to make the holidays happen every year. Mom wasn't done. She followed up by saying she'd be returning all the gifts she bought for everyone, claiming there was no point in giving gifts when the spirit of Christmas is gone. It was clearly meant to escalate the situation, and it worked. My siblings took her side again, saying she was completely justified and that I should fix things before it was too late. Their version of fixing things, of course, was me buying the $2,000 purse. Later that evening, I got a private text from Dad. He admitted he thought Mom was overreacting, but in the same breath, he encouraged me to just get the purse to keep the peace. That was classic Dad, avoiding conflict at all costs. I didn't respond right away. What could I even say? Meanwhile, the Reddit post was still gaining traction. The comments were pouring in, with people urging me to stand my ground. A lot of them shared their own experiences with entitled family members, and some of the stories made mine seem tame in comparison. I updated the post to include the latest drama, and the support I got was overwhelming. Still, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if I was being too harsh. I shared the situation with one of my close friends. After hearing the whole story, they were blunt. "Your mom is manipulating you. If you give in now, it'll never stop." They encouraged me to set firm boundaries, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. It wasn't the first time I'd heard advice like that, but hearing it from someone who knows me made it hit differently. At work, I vented to a coworker while we were grabbing coffee. They joked that I should cancel Mom instead. which made me laugh for the first time in days. It was a lighthearted comment, but it reminded me that the whole situation was ridiculous. The drama wasn't confined to our family group chat. Mom took it to Facebook, posting a vague status about selfish children who don't appreciate everything their parents do for them. She didn't name names, but it didn't take a detective to figure out she was talking about me. The post got a mix of supportive comments from her friends and a few thinly veiled jabs at me from extended family members. My aunt, Mom's sister, messaged me privately to ask what was going on. When I explained, she was surprisingly supportive. She admitted she'd seen Mom's Facebook post and thought it was over the top. She even offered to host Christmas at her house if things completely fell apart. Knowing I had her on my side gave me a bit of relief. Still, doubt started creeping in. Was I really being too harsh? Maybe I could find a cheaper designer purse and call it a compromise. It wouldn't be the one she wanted, but it might smooth things over. The idea lingered in my head until I overheard something that snapped me out of it. A cousin mentioned that one of my siblings had a plan to guilt trip me into giving them money for rent as some sort of punishment for not buying the purse. It was petty and vindictive, and it reminded me exactly why I needed to set boundaries. I wasn't just dealing with unreasonable demands from Mom, it was a whole system of entitlement that I'd been enabling for years. I remembered advice I'd gotten from a therapist a while back. You can love your family and still say no. That stuck with me. It wasn't about being harsh or cruel, it was about not letting myself get walked over. Mom stopped answering my texts after that. The silent treatment wasn't new, but it still stung. I tried reaching out a couple of times, mostly to keep communication open, but she ignored me. I suggested a secret Santa system for next year to avoid this kind of conflict, but my siblings shot it down immediately. They made it clear they liked the current system, where I foot most of the bill. After a lot of back and forth in my head, I made my decision. I wasn't going to budge. I wouldn't buy the purse, even if it meant Christmas was ruined. It felt like the only way to break the cycle. If Mom and my siblings wanted to be upset, that was on them. I'd done everything I could to make the holiday special, and I wasn't about to let their unreasonable demands push me into a corner. As Christmas drew closer, the tension in the family grew. The group chat stayed quiet, aside from the occasional passive-aggressive jab. I wasn't sure how it would all play out, but one thing was clear. This Christmas was going to be unlike any other we'd had before. Update 2. The escalation started with a group call Mom organized, complete with her dramatic flair. She opened the call by declaring that I had ruined Christmas and went on about how ungrateful children had drained her joy. My siblings chimed in, backing her up as if they'd rehearsed it. They hinted that they might not even show up for Christmas dinner unless I fixed things by buying the purse. The guilt tripping was relentless, but I stayed quiet and let them run out of steam. Later that night, Dad called me privately. He admitted he thought the whole situation was ridiculous, but in typical dad fashion, he said it wasn't worth the fight. He suggested I just get the purse to make everything go back to normal. Hearing that from him wasn't surprising, but it didn't make it any easier to stomach. It felt like everyone was telling me to cave for the sake of peace. The next day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled across something that stopped me in my tracks. Mom had posted photos from a recent spa day, complete with champagne, a luxury robe, and a hashtag about self-care. It didn't take long to piece together that she'd splurged on this trip while demanding I buy her a $2,000 purse. It wasn't about money, it was about control. Around the same time, my aunt stepped in with her backup plan. She texted me to say that if Mom followed through with canceling Christmas, she'd host it at her place instead. It was a relief to know I had somewhere to go if things fell apart completely. Then came a curveball. I received a year-end bonus at work. It wasn't massive, but it was enough to cover the purse if I wanted to. The timing was almost too convenient. For a moment, I considered buying the purse just to end the drama, but before I could even think it through, one of my siblings showed up at my apartment uninvited. They acted like they were just dropping by, but it didn't take long for their real agenda to surface. They launched into a guilt trip about how I was ruining everything and how easy it would be for me to make things right. I shut that conversation down as quickly as I could. The petty moves didn't stop there. A couple of days later, I found out from a friend of the family that Mom had uninvited me from her annual cookie baking event. It was one of her favorite holiday traditions, and she made a big show of hosting it every year. This time, she made sure everyone knew I wasn't welcome. It was just another way to drive the wedge deeper. At my next therapy session, I laid everything out, the calls, the texts, the uninviting, and even the spa day revelation. My therapist reminded me that I wasn't responsible for fixing everyone else's emotions, and that my happiness mattered too. It was good advice, but easier said than done. Things took another turn when a cousin reached out to me privately. They told me that Mom had been talking behind my back to extended family, painting me as selfish and greedy. According to them, she'd spun the story to make it sound like I was refusing to contribute anything to Christmas, conveniently leaving out all the details about the gifts I'd already bought or how much I'd spent on previous holidays. It stung, but it also solidified my resolve. Back on Reddit, I shared the latest updates. The response was overwhelming. People flooded the comments with their own stories about manipulative parents, offering advice and support. Some even messaged me directly to say how much my story resonated with them. It was a strange feeling, comforting, but also sobering to realize how common this kind of behavior was. Mom, meanwhile, kept up her social media antics. She posted a passive-aggressive meme about ungrateful children and how some people only call their parents when they want something. It was so pointed that I couldn't help but screenshot it and share it on Reddit. People in the comments called her out for what it was, a desperate attempt to gain sympathy. With everything that had happened, I decided to set a firm boundary. I texted Mom and told her that, unless she respected my decision, I wouldn't be attending Christmas this year. No purse, no compromises. I also made a plan to redistribute the gifts I'd already bought. Instead of letting them go to waste, I decided to donate them to a local charity. I shared the idea in the family group chat, which predictably set off another wave of outrage. The next day, Mom sent me a voice note. In it, she was sobbing, accusing me of breaking her heart and asking how I could do this to her. It was dramatic and emotionally charged, but it didn't change anything for me. I wasn't backing down. As Christmas crept closer, the tension in the family reached an all-time high. I didn't know how it would all end, but one thing was clear: this was no longer just about a purse. It was about breaking free from a toxic cycle that had gone on for far too long. Update 3. The family implosion started when my aunt stepped in to officially take charge. She sent out a group message, inviting everyone to her house for Christmas and promising a stress-free holiday. It was clear she was drawing a line in the sand. The invitation split the family into two camps: those on Aunt's side, me and a few extended family members, and those rallying behind Mom, my siblings, and a handful of her closer relatives. The divide deepened when one of my siblings called me. They were livid, accusing me of ruining everything and making Christmas impossible for everyone. They even went as far as to say they wouldn't show up anywhere for Christmas unless I made it right. I stood my ground, refusing to give in, and the conversation ended with more tension than it started. Not long after, Mom took her dramatics to the next level. She posted a picture of herself in bed on Facebook, claiming to be too sick with heartbreak to celebrate Christmas. The caption hinted at betrayal and ungrateful children, and her friends chimed in with supportive comments. It was over the top, even for her. What shocked me most was Dad finally cracking. During a phone call with him, I overheard him telling Mom to stop acting like a child and that she was making things worse. It was the first time I'd ever heard him stand up to her. Still, even in that moment, he told me I could end the whole mess by just buying the purse. He was walking a tightrope, as always. The situation escalated further when my siblings started airing dirty laundry on social media. They posted cryptic tweets and Instagram stories about toxic family members and fake nice people, making it painfully obvious they were talking about me. Their friends joined in, tagging me indirectly and fueling the fire. The turning point came when my aunt shared Mom's Christmas is canceled announcement with the extended family. Some relatives messaged me privately, saying they found Mom's behavior embarrassing. A cousin even leaked screenshots of a private chat where Mom had been bad-mouthing me. She'd left out key details, of course, like how much I'd already done for Christmas or the thoughtful gift I'd planned for her. Then came the anonymous messages. Someone, maybe a relative, maybe one of Mom's friends, sent me a series of DMs accusing me of being heartless and greedy. They claimed I was abandoning my family over something as small as a purse. It was exhausting, but I didn't engage. Meanwhile, my coworkers, who I'd been venting to throughout the ordeal, decided to lift my spirits. They organized a small holiday gathering at work, complete with snacks and a gift exchange. It wasn't fancy, but it was genuine, and their kindness felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the chaos at home. At my next therapy session, my therapist hit me with a question that stuck. If this wasn't your mom, would you tolerate this behavior from anyone else? That question lingered in my mind and helped me see things more clearly. It wasn't about the purse anymore, it was about the patterns I'd let go unchecked for years. One night, Mom called me out of the blue. It was past midnight, and she was sobbing. She said she was sorry, but the apology quickly shifted into a justification. She just wanted to feel special for once. When I asked if she understood why her demand was unfair, she dodged the question and shifted the blame back to me. It was a circular conversation that went nowhere. Adding fuel to the fire, one of my siblings accused me of trying to replace Mom with Aunt by agreeing to go to her house for Christmas. It was such a ridiculous accusation that I didn't even know how to respond. They were grasping at straws now, desperate to make me the villain. As the dust settled, something unexpected happened. Extended family members and even a few of Mom's friends started siding with me. The more people saw how far she was willing to go, the more they began to question her behavior. A younger cousin even messaged me privately to say they'd always looked up to me and thought I was doing the right thing. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. I decided to follow through with my regifting plan. I announced in the group chat that the gifts I'd originally bought for Mom and my siblings were being donated to a local charity. The message sent shockwaves through the chat. Mom exploded, accusing me of hating her and ruining the family. My siblings backed her up, but this time Dad surprised everyone by stepping in. He told them all to stop acting childish and that enough was enough. As Christmas approached, it was clear the family wasn't going to be the same after this. The drama wasn't over, but the power dynamics were shifting, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was starting to take control of my own life. Update 4. Christmas morning started quietly. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing around trying to make last-minute arrangements or stressing over whether everything was perfect. Instead, I headed to my aunt's house, where a small group of family members had gathered. The atmosphere was calm and cheerful, a stark contrast to the chaos I was used to. My aunt had kept her promise of a drama-free holiday, and it was refreshing. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and Christmas music played softly in the background. For once, it felt like what the holidays were supposed to be. True to their threats, my siblings didn't show up. They stayed with Mom instead, making sure to post plenty of pictures on social media. Their posts showed them lounging on the couch, surrounded by a modest spread of food. The captions were clearly aimed at me, with lines like "Real family sticks together" and "Cozy Christmas with those who matter most." It didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. It just confirmed how far they were willing to go to keep the narrative alive. Mom, despite all her earlier dramatics, ended up hosting a small gathering. The photos she posted were filled with forced smiles and captions like "Real love isn't about gifts." It was ironic, considering how the whole conflict started. From what I heard later, the gathering wasn't much of a celebration. Without the usual extravagance, the mood felt more like a regular Sunday dinner than Christmas. While all of this was happening, I decided to share my side of the story online. I posted pictures of the gifts I'd donated and wrote a heartfelt message about choosing kindness and breaking toxic cycles. The response was overwhelming. People commented, shared their own experiences, and thanked me for standing up for myself. It felt good to know I wasn't alone. Later in the day, Dad called me privately. He sounded tired, almost defeated. He admitted that he regretted not standing up to Mom earlier in their marriage and praised me for doing what he couldn't. Still, he wasn't ready to fully confront her and urged me to be patient. It was a bittersweet conversation, but I appreciated his honesty. By mid-afternoon, one of my siblings called me. They wasted no time accusing me of dividing the family and ruining Christmas for everyone. They demanded I apologize to Mom and fix things before it was too late. I kept calm and told them I wasn't changing my mind. The call ended with more tension, but I was done being dragged into their guilt games. Not long after, Mom sent me a long, emotional text. She went on about how hard it was to raise me, how much she'd sacrificed, and how I was turning my back on her. She ended with, "But you can't even do one nice thing for me." It was the same manipulative script she'd been using all along. I didn't respond. Later, my aunt pulled me aside to share something that nearly made me laugh. Mom had called her earlier, begging her to pressure me into apologizing and buying the purse. My aunt shut it down immediately, telling her to stop the games and focus on the real meaning of the holidays. Knowing someone had my back in all of this made the day feel even lighter. As the evening wound down, a few extended family members reached out to me. They'd seen Mom's posts and wanted to let me know they supported me. Some even shared their own experiences of dealing with her manipulative behavior. It was eye-opening to realize just how many people had been affected by the same patterns. Before I left, my aunt surprised me with a small gift. It was a family heirloom, a delicate gold locket that had belonged to my grandmother. She told me it was her way of thanking me for standing up to the dysfunction and trying to break the cycle. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was deeply meaningful. That night, I spent some time reflecting on everything that had happened. Without the weight of trying to please everyone, the day had felt lighter, almost peaceful. It was a stark contrast to the chaos I'd grown used to. For the first time, I realized just how much energy I'd been wasting on trying to meet impossible expectations. Before the night was over, a cousin texted me with an interesting tidbit. Apparently, one of my siblings had been complaining that they didn't get any expensive gifts from Mom this year. The irony was almost too much. When I updated Reddit with the full story, the post went viral. Thousands of people shared their support and similar experiences. It was humbling and validating to see how many people resonated with my situation. Mom's final move came late that night. She left me a voicemail, tearfully saying she hoped I would come to my senses in the new year. It was dramatic, but it felt hollow. By then, her tactics had lost their power over me. As I turned off my phone, I made a promise to myself I would keep this boundary in place. No more guilt, no more manipulation. This was the start of a new chapter, and I wasn't going back. Update 5. The aftermath of the holiday drama carried into the new year, but the tone had shifted. Mom didn't invite me to her New Year's celebration, which I heard was another small gathering with my siblings. If this had been any other year, I might have been upset. This time, I was relieved. I spent New Year's Eve with a few friends, eating takeout and watching movies. It was simple, and for once, I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to please anyone. Not long after, one of my siblings reached out. Their tone was different, not accusatory, but desperate. They asked to borrow money, claiming they couldn't trust Mom anymore to help with rent. It was ironic, considering they'd sided with her throughout the holiday drama. I told them no. They didn't take it well, but I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore, especially when they'd tried to guilt-trip me just weeks earlier. Meanwhile, Mom ramped up her public campaign. She posted more passive-aggressive updates on Facebook, trying to paint herself as the victim. This time, though, the sympathy was waning. Extended family members who'd learned the full story stopped engaging with her posts. A few even started commenting directly, pointing out inconsistencies in her narrative. It was clear her usual tactics weren't working like they used to. Dad continued his quiet support from the sidelines. He'd text me sporadically, apologizing for not stepping in earlier but still avoiding any real confrontation with Mom. It was frustrating in some ways, but at least he wasn't actively adding to the drama. His texts usually ended with something like, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," which felt like a small win. Aunt, on the other hand, became a rock for me. She started hosting more family gatherings without Mom, creating a space where the extended family could reconnect without the usual tension. These gatherings felt different, lighter, easier. She also began subtly encouraging other family members to set boundaries with Mom, which led to an interesting shift. Some extended relatives began pulling back from Mom entirely. A cousin mentioned that they'd stopped inviting her to their events after seeing how she'd handled Christmas. It wasn't a mass exodus, but the ripple effect was noticeable. Mom had burned a lot of bridges, and people were starting to see her patterns for what they were. In therapy, I hit a milestone. I shared everything that had happened and felt a sense of progress I hadn't experienced before. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped by the guilt that had always kept me tethered to my family's expectations. My therapist pointed out how far I'd come, which made me realize how much lighter my life felt without constantly bending to their demands. Of course, Mom wasn't done. She made a dramatic post about being abandoned by her family, complete with an old photo of her holding me and my siblings as toddlers. It was the kind of post designed to pull at heartstrings, but this time it backfired. People called her out, some publicly and others in private messages. A cousin later told me they'd messaged her directly, asking why she couldn't just apologize and move forward. She didn't respond. The most surprising twist came from one of my siblings. They reached out privately and admitted they'd started to see how manipulative Mom could be. They didn't go as far as to apologize for their role in the holiday drama, but it was the first crack in the armor. It gave me hope that maybe things could change, even if it wouldn't happen overnight. On a personal level, things were looking up. I got a promotion at work, which felt like a fresh start. The timing couldn't have been better. It was as if the universe was rewarding me for finally taking control of my life. Without the constant stress of family drama, I had more energy to focus on my career and my own happiness. One of the best moments came in the form of a letter from the charity where I donated the gifts. They thanked me for the contributions and shared how the items had brought joy to families in need. I shared the letter with my aunt and a few cousins, who were touched by the gesture. It felt like the perfect way to close that chapter of the holiday saga. After the dramatic voicemail Mom left on Christmas night, she went silent for weeks. It wasn't like her, but I suspected it was more about embarrassment than anything else. She'd played her cards and lost, and now she didn't know how to regroup. For once, the silence didn't bother me. My final Reddit update went viral, with tens of thousands of upvotes and comments. People applauded the progress, the boundaries I'd set, and the lessons I'd learned. The support from strangers was overwhelming and humbling. Many shared their own similar experiences, turning the comment section into a space for mutual encouragement and solidarity. Aunt has already started planning a family trip for the summer, specifically inviting only those who contributed positively to the holiday. It's something to look forward to, a reminder that family doesn't have to mean chaos. As for me, I found a sense of peace I didn't think was possible. The weight of trying to manage everyone else's expectations is gone. This year taught me that boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges to a healthier, happier life. And for the first time, I feel like I'm standing on solid ground.